Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, 1, 2. I'm not ashamed to tell you that when my mother died, I cried like a baby.
Thousands of letters, photographs, documents, obsessively saved throughout his life.
What are you trying to get out of me?
I've been trying to make sense of the divorce all my life.
Musically nice, all right? It was a word that appealed to us.
I'm just an ordinary guy who's led an ordinary life.
Alan Berliner is a visual artist with a prolific and highly regarded body of documentary films to his name. His documentaries, The Family Album, Intimate Stranger, Nobody's Business, The Sweetest Sound, and most recently, Wide Awake, have screened at the most prestigious film festivals around the world, including the Berlin International Film Festival, Vision du Reel, and the Sundance Film Festival. Berliner's films have broadcast nationally to millions of Americans, challenging their expectations of documentary films and their ideas about family, inheritance, memory, and a good night's sleep. POV has been honored to present 4 of Berliner's films to public television audiences, and I'm pleased that he's joined us this evening to discuss his work. Alan, thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for coming.
Your work as an artist is hardly confined to filmmaking. When and why did you decide to make films? Were you looking for a language that your other work didn't provide you?
When I went to college and I found a really, really wonderful and stimulating and really just mind-expanding experimental film program that would allow me to not only make films, but even when I graduated as a senior, they gave me a room and I had a gallery exhibition. I filled the room up, every corner, every square inch, cubic foot of this room was filled with things. So it really was, in the end, sort of a way of finding a variety of languages that I could speak through. I'm not a filmmaker who can say, well, I'm writing this, I'm shooting this, I'm editing that, and I'm in post-production on this. I don't do, 4 films, 3 films, even 2 films at the same time. I'm very monogamous. I work on 1 film at a time. In that time where my energies are not necessarily unfocused, but not specifically generated towards the next film, that's when I start to say, this is a good time to take all this energy and work on an installation project or make a sculpture or something like that. So that's generally been, the sort of rhythm of my creative process.
I think I read in an article or an interview that you talk about quoting, your films quoting each other, and for example, the first film where we meet your father is actually not Nobody's Business. We meet him via his voice in
the Family Album.
In the Family Album. So can you talk a bit about the process of collecting all of this material and how it sort of distills? Like, how do you know what goes where?
I do what collages do. I surround myself with things that I feel have potential, things that I like to look at or touch or feel, or images that interest me, and though I don't quite know what to do with them, I know one day I might, or I hope one day I might. And when I'm done with a film, those images that I've used, that I've borrowed, that I've appropriated from this vast archive, even the sources of research, etc., they don't go in a box as if I'm done with them. They go back in the archive. Everything goes back in orbit. It goes back where they came from, which means they're in play again. Everything is in play again. And so from one film to the next, especially given the sort of continuity of theme and character and obsession, if you will, that runs through my work, it's not unusual that I would call back things, because they have a new meaning here, or that they can become a different kind of metaphor here.
You have a body of short films that preceded your longer documentary films. But the first sort of film that comes to mind when you talk about this orbit of of elements is family album. And the fact that you went through, I think, the home movies of 60 families.
I think much more, many more.
Tell me about the process of putting all of those strangers' home movies into orbit, and from that orbit constructing a narrative that resonated so personally.
It's funny when you talk about the family album. In the credits, that was the first film I actually had credits, with thank yous, and I put Serendipity. It's not a company, it's not a person, it's the energy, the thing. I answered an ad on a bulletin board, that I saw, advertising home movies for sale. And again, I didn't know how long that ad, the little postcard of a notice, handwritten, had been on the board. I just called up, and I was the first person to respond.
Go to sleep, my little baby, Bayushka, Bayu. See, the moon is shining on you, Bayushka, Bayu. I will tell you many stories if you close your eyes. Go to sleep, my little baby, Bayushka, Bayu.
I started to notice the way that home movies, the cans of home movies, the way they were structured, the way they were organized, ordered, the way they were cataloged. There would be cans, like here's a can, just an empty film can. On the side it would say, our son, I'll pick a name, Eli, age 1. Eli, age 2, next can, Eli. They're chronological. And at about age 11 or 12, there's like suddenly there are no more cans that say Eli, age 11 or 12 or 13, because now the children are self-conscious, things aren't so cute anymore, there's independence, there's rebellion, and so, you learn that. You see that in the home. You see it tells you something about family. It tells you something about socialization, about growing old.
Alice, this is Dad. Susie had an emergency appendix operation this morning. She's doing fine, and she's in Bomskar Hospital.
My mother died when I was 9. I remember the day she died. My father, he tried to tell us that she wasn't going to come home from the hospital. I had never seen him cry. He was always a strong person in my life. It made me feel like my whole foundation was shaken. It made me feel like my whole world was collapsing.
I was not only thrilled that the family album was going to be on POV, but the fact is it's complete non-narrative collage film. It's 60 minutes of home movies from beginning to end. Not only that, but the soundtrack of the film is also completely collaged. There's no sync in the film. It's, I can't tell you how many garage sales and flea markets I went to, and there'd be a cassette tape, and I'd buy it for a nickel, a dime, or a quarter, and the people actually thought I was going to use it in my, and again, we're talking now in 2010, people thought I was going to use it in my telephone answering machine because I was too cheap to pay, I don't know, $1 or $2 for a real brand new tape. But no, I took it home and I was just, what could be on this? And sometimes it was nothing, sometimes it was gibberish, but other times it was just pure family, Christmas song, it didn't matter. Birthday, wedding, birthdays, weddings, anniversaries, didn't matter.
He led an interesting life, but a lot of people have led interesting lives. He was just an ordinary man.
Motivated by the idea that maybe there was something I could do with my own family, that brought me to the next film, Intimate Stranger. Because my grandfather had died in the middle of writing his autobiography. You know, he died in a hit-and-run car accident. All the boxes were put in the back of my uncle's office, 15 boxes for 16, 17 years, and I thought, there's a story there. And I wrote a film proposal that got, you know, funded through a variety of sources. I said, I'm going to make a film about my grandfather, and I'm going to use what's in these boxes, you know, which were mostly, to be honest with you, letters and photographs, which made me realize, you know, I take risks in my filmmaking life, in my creative process, that I would never take in real life.
As far as I know, this is the most recent photograph I have with him.
This was taken in '69, correct?
Yeah, I'm 13 years old. The last memory that I have is sometime around my entry into college, when I told him that I wanted to study filmmaking. He said, well, maybe that's not such a good idea. Why don't you try and study foreign languages?
And become a diplomat, probably. And therefore continue what he set out to do.
Ah, come on, wait for Christ. To me, this is a bunch of crap. Usually, you follow in somebody's footsteps who has made a success of himself.
I think he would have had aspirations of being some kind of diplomat, some kind of emissary, ambassador. He would have loved that.
I interviewed my mother first, then her next brother, Mark. I went in descending age order. After each interview, and I have hundreds of questions, and I'm processing their interview, transcribing it, and then taking what I've learned and what I've known to the next interview, and then taking between the two of them, taking them to the third. So when I got to my Uncle Ben, you know, I'd already done very extensive 5 or 6 hour interviews with each of his siblings. I'd read every letter his father wrote, and I'll never forget, he sat down on the couch across from me before we began the interview, and he said, I remember the day you were born, and I remember being so excited. I got the word that my sister had just given birth to a little boy who was going to be named Alan, and I rode my bicycle. I'll never forget, I rode my bicycle as fast as I could to the hospital in Brooklyn, and there I was, like, holding you in my arms in the hospital, and I was, you know, you were my first nephew, and this was profoundly exciting. And he said, you know, I held you in my arms, and then he said, and I have to tell you, now, right here and now, I'm afraid of you. You know more about my mother and my father and my family probably than I do. You know, you start to see the family as a garden, you know, and you have to be careful where you walk and careful how you approach each of the trees and the flowers in the garden, you know.
What is it about family and all of the complicated things that word and those relationships imply that has motivated you all these years to continue plumbing that material? You always find new things to say, new discoveries. How do you wind up doing that?
Family was a complicated subject for me growing up. My parents were divorced, and it was a big kind of ache of mine growing up, feeling torn, being put in positions where I had to choose sides, being put in positions where I had to assess what it meant to love each of my parents as individuals, and struggle with the idea that I couldn't keep them together no matter what I did, and all the pain. And anyway, you know, that's where I came from. That's part of my personal story, history. And so, again, you know, the serendipity of finding the footage, the anonymous footage of that I used in the family album, and now suddenly being compelled and somehow synchronistically magnetized to this subject of the family, when it was something that had been and has been and still is in many ways percolating, you know, deep in my psyche, made me realize, you know, this is my theme. At a deep level, this is a theme I need to go here.
I was lonely. As lonely as you were during all the time that she was performing, you still would have wanted to keep the marriage together.
Absolutely. I felt it was important to my children to have a complete home life. I come from a background, when you get married, you stay married. You make the best of what you have and do the best you can. That's what I was doing.
That was put to you, Alan, one night. He shook you up a little and put you against the wall and said, would you rather have Mother happy away from us or unhappy and with us? I can still see your face in front of me, shaking and saying, unhappy and with us. I could understand, Alan. I could understand.
Then I think about the risks that are inherently involved in taking on the role of family storyteller. And in Intimate Stranger, we begin to hear your father and the conflict between you and your father about the value of this storytelling that then explodes in the following film, Nobody's Business. Can you tell me about how you navigated that risk? Because it was clear that his position didn't change.
What he does in his disavowing the validity of the project itself is he calls some basic assumptions into question, not only for me as the filmmaker, but for the audience. So when my father disses, for lack of a better word, his father-in-law, Joseph Casuto, in Intimate Stranger, he's calling into question the very nature of the project. What can anyone learn from the life of an ordinary person? You know, it's a really interesting question. What's the point? I'm making a film about people who lived and died. Like any of us, they experience joy and they experience disappointment, and they, you know, the gamut of human experience is inscribed in every life.
I don't want to see these pictures. They bring back sour memories. I don't want to look at them. I got over them. I'm over them.
If you're over them, then you can
Look at them all you want, but leave me alone.
I want to ask you about them.
No, you're not going to ask me about it. I'm not going to answer you. You keep on hounding me and pounding me.
But I don't understand what the problem is.
And that shows your lack of understanding. That shows your lack of sympathy. That shows your lack of empathy. That shows your lack of feeling what this means.
A son is allowed to ask his father.
How did making Nobody's Business change your relationship with your father?
True to his apathy, if you will, for anything related to family, let alone his apathy for the stories of his own life, you know, I didn't change him. But what I realized is that the film changed the way other people looked at him, which indirectly at first, and then quite dramatically over time, changed the way he had to function in the world, you know. Suddenly he had to accept that people now know who he was and had compassion for him and would want to sit next to him at lunch and dinner and talk. Suddenly he has to, like, deal, you know. And it brought him out of his shell a little bit, you know. And, you know, a friend of mine who's a social worker who observed my father and knew my father well before and after thought it was one of the most profound interventions he'd actually ever witnessed.
How can you give someone a name and not know anything about it?
I can't answer questions what might have been or should have been. Like it or not, that was the name, Alan. You take it or you leave it, period.
Why not Aaron? Why not Adam?
Because we liked Alan.
Why did you like Alan?
It was simple.
So was Alex.
Well, we liked Alan.
Why did you name me Alan?
Alan, you're being impossible.
Each film is harder to make and it's more frightening to make because there seems to have been some imperative, unconscious, but also something that's a guiding imperative, we'll just say, to take the form of both essay filmmaking and personal filmmaking to its deepest, highest, perhaps even darkest, but to take it all the way and to take the risks entailed and involved and not to be afraid of it, but you know, not to play it safe, but to actually go to this place. And I think what's happened in the last two films, in Sweetest Sound and Wide Awake, is that I've been in the rather awkward, complicated, but, you know, and risky territory of being both a subject in the film and the filmmaker, and another kind of, and several others presences in between. I'm the person who has to glean insight from the distance between those two personas.
Ellen, Eli's up. Ellen, sweetie, Eli's up. You said you'd go this morning.
Sure, I think, what time is it?
It's 6:20.
Okay, I went to sleep really late.
But you said you'd go this morning.
I can't, it's really late. Just give me a break this morning.
What, this morning? You said this was the morning you'd go. He's crying. Come on, it's not fair.
Don't wake me up.
Shh, Ellen, sweetie, it's not fair. He's crying.
I'm gonna figure it out. I can't do it. Figure it out.
Figure it out when? What are you talking about?
You know, you have to be just aggressive enough, stupid enough, smart enough, modest enough to even make these journeys. And they are journeys. Each of the films is a journey. To take them, let alone pull it off. And you know, I don't even claim to have pulled it off. You know, but I'm on some level proud that they had the nerve. Not heroic or it's not about courage, but that I dared do it, you know, that I tried.